Tonight we began how ancient people used silence as a weapon. But before we get started, make sure that you subscribed and comment me where are you watching from. There are many ways to win a fight. Most of them are loud. History remembers noise well. Shouting armies. Clashing shields. Orders barked across open ground. Victory usually announces itself. But there were places where nothing announced anything. In those places, the absence of sound did more damage than weapons ever could. Ancient people understood noise. Noise meant life. Noise meant movement. Noise meant the world was behaving properly. Silence meant something had gone wrong. In early warfare, silence was unsettling because it removed information. You could not tell how many people were nearby. You could not tell where danger would arrive from, you could not even tell if you were being watched. And humans do not like being watched by something that refuses to reveal itself. Armies trained for noise. They practiced shouting. They practiced charging. They practiced overwhelming an enemy's senses until fear took over. Silence resisted all of that. In forests, sound behaved differently. Footsteps vanished. Voices felt smaller. Orders dissolved before reaching anyone useful. Men raised in open land found themselves whispering without deciding to. Weapons felt heavier. Breathing felt louder than it should. Nothing had attacked them yet. That was the problem. Silence forced the imagination to work overtime. Every broken branch felt intentional. Every pause felt observed. Ancient soldiers were taught to read signs. Dust meant movement, birds fleeing meant danger. Smoke meant people. Silence offered none of these. And so the mind filled the gap. Groups slowed down without orders being given. People stopped walking in straight lines. Eyes drifted away from the path and into the trees. Silence does not demand attention. It waits until attention gives itself willingly. In some regions, enemies learned this early. They did not announce themselves. They did not challenge. They did not warn. They let time do the work. An arrow that arrives without sound feels different. Not because of pain. Because of confusion. Someone falls. No one knows from where. There is no direction to face. No opponent to charge. The group reacts late. Always late. Silence does not rush. After the first incident, people listen harder. After the second, they stop talking altogether. Speech begins to feel dangerous. Orders become hand signals. Hand signals become guesses. Guesses become hesitation. Silence changes posture. It makes shoulders rise. It shortens steps, people stop standing apart. Crowding feels safer, even though it is not. Ancient commanders understood something modern ones would later formalize. Morale does not collapse when men die. It collapses when men stop understanding what is happening. Silence accelerates that process. There were places where armies advanced for days without contact. No villages. No resistance. No sign of flight. Just absence. Those places stayed unconquered not because they fought harder, but because they did not confirm the rules of fighting. Invaders waited for resistance. Resistance never arrived. Instead, supplies diminished. Sleep shortened. Confidence thinned. Men began to feel like intruders in a space that did not acknowledge them. Silence makes trespassing feel personal. Eventually, someone would suggest turning back. Not loudly. Not officially. Just a quiet observation about weather, terrain, or timing. Others would agree without discussion. The decision would be made without ceremony. Later histories would describe these moments vaguely. Routes altered. Campaigns delayed. Objectives reconsidered. No defeat recorded. Silence leaves no witnesses. And so it continued. Different regions. Different peoples. Same effect. Silence did not need strategy. It did not need leadership. It simply needed patience. Silence was never empty. It only appeared that way to people who expected answers. In many places, long before writing, long before maps, long before borders were drawn with ink instead of footsteps, silence was something learned. Something practiced. Something understood as carefully as a weapon is understood by the hand that carries it. There were lands where sound traveled too far. A snapped branch could move through a forest like a message. A voice, once raised, did not return. People who lived in those places learned to exist without announcing themselves. Not as a trick. Not as a strategy discussed aloud. It was simply how presence worked. You were there, or you were not, and the land decided which of those was visible. Outsiders noticed it first as absence. Villages without noise. Paths without conversation. Fires that burned low and left no signal. They wrote about it later, when they had returned at all. Their accounts did not describe attacks. They described waiting. Waiting for something to happen. Waiting for someone to appear. Waiting for a sign that they were no longer alone. Nothing happened. And in that nothing, certainty began to thin. Armies moved with sound by default. Metal answered metal. Leather creaked. Breath came in rhythm. Command required voice, and voice assumed reply. Silence interrupted that expectation. Orders went out and came back altered, delayed, swallowed by trees, by fog, by distance. In some forests, the ground itself absorbed noise. Moss thickened the earth. Fallen needles softened steps. Even mistakes landed quietly. Someone unfamiliar with such ground would slow without realizing why. Each step would feel uncertain, as though the land was asking permission. No arrows were fired. No horn sounded. And yet the movement changed. Men trained to read signals found none. Scouts returned with nothing useful to report. Not danger. Not safety. Only stillness. The kind that refuses to clarify itself. Silence does not threaten. It waits. In deserts, the effect was different but no less deliberate. Sound carried there too, but so did mirage. Distance lied constantly. A voice might reach farther than expected, or vanish entirely in heat. Groups who lived in those spaces learned not to fill the air. Conversation was economical. Movement happened early or late, when the land itself allowed it. Invaders spoke too much. They always did. They argued direction. They reassured one another. They called names into brightness. Every word felt necessary. Every word revealed position, intention, fatigue. Those who lived there did not respond. They did not hide because they feared confrontation. They remained silent because silence kept choice intact. To speak was to commit. To stay quiet was to remain undefined. And undefined things are difficult to pursue. Along certain coasts, islands rose where ships anchored reluctantly. Shorelines showed no welcome and no resistance. Fires were absent. Drums did not answer. Even animals seemed scarce. Sailors described the unease of stepping onto land that did not acknowledge arrival. No challenge. No greeting. Just ground, some turned back without knowing why. Later, stories formed. People said the land was cursed. That spirits lived there. That gods watched silently. But the truth was simpler. The people there had learned that to be seen was optional. Silence removed the rhythm that outsiders relied on. Without reaction, aggression lost shape. Without sound, time stretched. Waiting became heavy. Doubt crept in, not sharply, but gradually, like cold through cloth. Nothing happens. Still nothing happens. Why is nothing happening? That question wore confidence thin. In northern regions, snow completed what silence began. Sound traveled oddly there, bending, vanishing, returning distorted. Footprints appeared and disappeared. Wind erased evidence faster than memory could hold it. Those who lived there learned to leave no marks worth following. A trail was not a mistake. It was a choice. And most of the time, it was unnecessary. Visitors described the feeling of being watched without proof. Of movement sensed but not confirmed. Of presence inferred but never encountered. No ambush followed. Just the knowledge that movement had been observed. Silence does not need climax. It does not rush. It only waits for the other side to decide whether continuing forward is worth the uncertainty. Many decided it was not. They left without defeat. They recorded no loss. They claimed no enemy. Only discomfort. Only confusion. Only the sense that something had been understood too late. Silence, when practiced long enough, stops being passive. It becomes a boundary. One that does not announce itself. One that does not argue. One that does not need enforcement. You cross it only if you are willing to accept not knowing what comes next. Most were not. And so they learned, quietly, to turn back. Silence did not need agreement. It worked even when it was misunderstood. In places where hills folded into one another and valleys narrowed the sky, sound behaved strangely. A shout could echo back altered, delayed, or fractured into something unrecognizable. People who lived there learned early that noise did not always belong to the one who made it. Voices returned carrying shapes that felt wrong. Too many answers. Too many directions. So they learned to keep words close. Visitors filled the air instead. They called to companions who were only a few steps away. They tested echoes, laughed at them, then stopped laughing when the echoes did not fade properly. When sound lingered too long, it began to feel like it was being held, nothing followed. But nothing needed to, silence extended the moment. It stretched time until decisions lost urgency. Leaders who depended on momentum felt it slipping. Orders were repeated. Repetition dulled authority. Men hesitated, not from fear of attack, but from the weight of uncertainty. Silence created room for thought. Thought created doubt. In some regions, silence was not constant. It arrived in patterns. Long stillness, then sudden movement. Stillness again. No warning. No explanation. People accustomed to predictable cycles found this exhausting. They could not rest properly. They could not prepare properly. Readiness became permanent, and permanence drained strength. Those who lived there did not call this strategy. They did not discuss it. They simply moved when movement was useful, and stopped when stopping was useful. The land provided the rhythm. Humans followed it. Outsiders tried to impose their own rhythm. It never matched. Along rivers that bent unpredictably through dense growth, boats drifted without sound. Paddles entered water slowly. Even ripples were minimized. A river carries sound differently. It does not scatter it. It delivers it. Silence there was a form of respect. Invading parties announced themselves by accident. Metal touched stone. A cough broke air. A whispered command traveled farther than expected. Those who lived along the river did not answer. They listened, adjusted position, and continued to remain unconfirmed. No resistance appeared. No opposition revealed itself, but routes began to feel exposed. Camps felt poorly chosen. Sleep became shallow. Silence does not confront. It observes. In wide grasslands, the opposite problem occurred. Sound disappeared too easily. Wind erased it. Distance dissolved it. Shouts failed to return. Riders learned that calling out was pointless. Messages had to be carried physically, and that took time. Those native to the land were comfortable with this. They waited. They watched dust, birds, shifts in the air. Communication happened through movement, not voice. A horse turning at the wrong moment said more than any shout. Visitors mistook the quiet for emptiness. They moved faster than they should have. They separated. They trusted that silence meant absence. It did not. Silence was presence without declaration. At night, this became heavier. Darkness already limits certainty. Silence removes confirmation. A snapped twig would normally reassure, something happened, therefore something is happening. But in practiced silence, even accidents were avoided. The night remained smooth. Unbroken. People began to imagine sounds instead. That was worse. When your mind fills gaps, it never chooses calm explanations. Across generations, silence became embedded into belief. Some cultures treated it as a moral quality. Others as a spiritual discipline. Speaking unnecessarily was considered wasteful. Noise invited attention. Attention invited obligation. Better to remain undefined. Stories passed down warned not of enemies who attacked, but of places where voices failed. Where words felt swallowed. Where shouting into the dark made the dark feel closer, not farther away. Maps reflected this in subtle ways. Borders blurred. Notes became vague. Unclear. Unsettled. Uninhabited, even when it was not. Silence protected people by erasing their certainty from the outside world. Empires preferred problems they could name, silence refused names. It offered no leader to negotiate with. No army to count. No threat to respond to. Just space that resisted interpretation. Eventually, choices were made. Routes adjusted. Objectives changed. Campaigns shifted elsewhere. Official records blamed weather, supply, terrain. They rarely mentioned the quiet. But those who were there remembered. They remembered how confidence drained without conflict. How waiting became heavier than marching. How leaving felt like relief rather than retreat. Silence did not, and so the land remained, not conquered, not defeated, not celebrated. Just left alone, continuing its rhythm uninterrupted. Silence works best when it does not announce its success. It leaves no monuments. No scars. Only absence in the plans of others. Silence does not age the way weapons do. It does not rust. It does not improve. It simply remains usable. As generations passed, the knowledge of when to be quiet stopped being taught directly. It was absorbed instead. Children learned it the same way they learned where not to step, where ice was thin, where wind changed direction unexpectedly. No one explained. Correction came through absence. Through watching. Through noticing what survived. Silence became practical memory. In places where stone absorbed sound rather than reflected it, voices felt strangely weak. Words fell flat, as if dropped onto cloth instead of air. People raised in such places never trusted volume. They trusted timing. A pause placed correctly carried more meaning than a sentence. Visitors filled the space instinctively. They spoke to confirm reality. To hear themselves exist. When no one answered, they spoke louder. Loudness created urgency. Urgency led to mistakes. Nothing punished those mistakes immediately. That delay was important. Immediate consequences teach quickly, but they also give clarity. Silence denied clarity. It let error continue unchecked. It allowed people to commit further, to go deeper, to invest more before realizing something was wrong. By the time they understood, turning back felt wasteful. Continuing felt dangerous. Silence did not push them toward either option. It waited. Waiting is heavier than force. In coastal regions where fog arrived without warning, sound behaved differently again. Horns and calls dissolved into moisture. Shapes appeared before voices did. People learned to identify intention by movement alone. A boat drifting sideways said one thing. A boat moving straight said another. Words were unreliable. Motion was honest. Outsiders trusted signals that no longer worked. They waited for replies that never came. They mistook fog-muted silence for consent, for ignorance, for retreat. By the time clarity returned, positions had shifted. Still no confrontation. Silence preserved deniability. No one could prove resistance existed. No banners fell. No victory songs were written. Only frustration accumulated quietly, stored in reports that avoided emotion. Some cultures learned to weaponize this misunderstanding deliberately. They did not block paths. They failed to acknowledge them. They did not guard borders. They allowed borders to dissolve into ambiguity. People crossed without knowing when crossing had occurred. This removed the moment of decision. Without a clear threshold, invaders could not mark progress. They could not say, "We are here now." They were always in between. Always approaching. Always unsure whether they had already arrived. Uncertainty is exhausting. Silence also changed how time was experienced. Without constant verbal reinforcement, days blurred. Marches felt longer. Waiting felt endless. Leaders who measured success in milestones struggled when milestones refused to appear. Nothing happened. Then still nothing happened, then the realization came that this was the event. Silence stripped drama from conflict. It removed the emotional peaks that justified effort. Without stories to tell, motivation faded. Men did not feel heroic enduring nothing. They wanted something to react to. Silence denied them that gift. In some traditions, silence was believed to attract attention from forces that listened rather than watched. Spirits, ancestors, the land itself. Speaking too much was seen as disrespectful, even dangerous. The quiet was not empty. It was occupied. This belief changed behavior in subtle ways. Camps were arranged differently. Fires burned lower. Tools were handled with care. The absence of noise reduced traces. Reduced traces reduced discovery. Over time, this created a feedback loop. The quieter people were, the less they were noticed. The less they were noticed, the more silence seemed effective. Effectiveness reinforced belief. From the outside, it looked like absence. Empires wrote silence out of their narratives because it offered no lesson they could apply elsewhere. You cannot train soldiers to fight nothing. You cannot build monuments to hesitation. You cannot celebrate a campaign that ends because morale dissolved without explanation. So silence became footnotes. Margins. Blank spaces between events. But blank spaces matter. They indicate where certainty failed. Long after borders shifted and names changed, those silent regions often remained oddly consistent. Less altered. Less reorganized. Less absorbed. Not untouched, but differently touched. Lightly. Silence allowed adaptation without surrender. It did not stop history. It slowed it. Bent it slightly off course. Enough to be missed. Enough to survive. Silence never claimed victory. It never needed to. Silence also learned to travel. It moved with people who left their homes and settled elsewhere. It followed them into markets, into camps, into negotiations. They carried it in posture, in pauses, in the way they allowed others to speak first and finish speaking completely. Those unfamiliar with this mistook it for weakness. They spoke over it. They filled it. They rushed to conclude. And later wondered why agreements felt uneven, why expectations failed, why outcomes shifted in quiet ways they could not trace back to a single moment. Silence does not argue. It redirects. In councils where words were currency, those who used fewer spent them carefully. A brief statement placed after a long pause carried disproportionate weight. People leaned in. They assumed depth. Sometimes there was depth. Sometimes there was only patience. Both were effective. Silence created asymmetry. It made one side visible and the other unreadable. Visibility invites prediction. Unreadability resists it. Over time, this imbalance shaped how power moved. Not through dominance, but through miscalculation. Silence allowed people to be underestimated safely. In regions where travel was difficult and communication slow, this advantage multiplied. Rumors replaced observation. Stories lost detail. Silence filled the gaps between facts and let imagination do the rest. Imagination is rarely kind to the unknown. Places became troublesome, unreliable, not worth the effort. Not because of resistance, but because of ambiguity. Resources were redirected elsewhere. Attention followed clarity. Silence thrives when attention leaves. Even internally, silence served a purpose. Communities that valued it experienced conflict differently. Disputes were not resolved quickly. They were allowed to cool. Words that might escalate tension were withheld. Time acted as mediator. This frustrated outsiders who expected immediate answers, clear positions, decisive reactions. They did not understand that delay was the decision. Silence also changed memory. Events that occurred without noise were remembered less vividly. Trauma without sound fades differently. It does not disappear, but it loses sharp edges. This allowed survival without constant reenactment. History preserved through silence is lighter to carry. Not empty. Just less burdensome. In places where oral tradition dominated, this mattered deeply. Stories were chosen carefully. Not everything deserved repetition. Silence filtered memory, keeping only what sustained identity rather than inflamed it. Violence shouted its way into legend. Silence allowed itself to be forgotten. That forgetfulness was protection. Over centuries, observers began to notice patterns without fully understanding them. Why certain regions resisted administration. Why certain populations remained difficult to classify. Why borders bent around areas rather than through them. The explanation was never singular. It was accumulated restraint. Silence did not stop change. It shaped the pace of it. It allowed selective adoption rather than wholesale replacement. New ideas arrived quietly, tested privately, and integrated slowly. No announcements. No declarations. Just gradual adjustment. This made these societies appear stagnant from the outside. They were not. They were simply uninterested in spectacle. Progress without performance is hard to measure. Empires measured loudly. They built roads, issued proclamations, struck coins. Silence did none of this. It left no trail for historians to follow easily. Absence confused record keepers. Confusion became neglect. Neglect became survival. Even when silence was broken, by necessity, by accident, by intrusion, it returned quickly. It reasserted itself not as a rule, but as a preference. Noise was tolerated briefly, then allowed to exhaust itself. Silence waits out disturbance. It always has. Because silence does not compete that it endures. And endurance, over long enough time, looks very much like victory. Even if no one ever says so, silence never announces its return. It simply resumes. After disruptions pass, after armies move on, after traders redirect routes, after officials stop asking questions, the quiet settles back into place as if it had been waiting nearby. Not restored. Not repaired. Just present again, unchanged. People who live with silence do not notice its absence until it is gone. Noise feels heavy. Crowded. Demanding. When it leaves, relief follows, not celebration. Silence is not treated as sacred. It is treated as normal. That normality shapes behavior in ways that are difficult to see from the outside. Movement becomes deliberate. Choices are made with fewer words. Observation replaces explanation. When something goes wrong, it is corrected quietly, without performance. This removes the need for blame. Blame requires audience. Silence denies one. In societies shaped this way, authority rarely shouts. Leaders speak less because they are heard more. Commands are short. Instructions assume competence. Trust is implied, not negotiated. Outsiders misread this as looseness. They expect disorder. They look for arguments, for fractures, for voices competing. They find none. Disagreement exists, but it does not echo. It does not spread. It is contained by restraint. Problems are addressed before they become stories. Stories are powerful. Silence limits their reach. In regions where weather dominates daily life, silence becomes cooperation with forces larger than language. Wind does not listen. Cold does not negotiate. Loudness offers no advantage. People adapt by yielding attention rather than demanding control. This humility extends beyond survival. It shapes worldview. Humans are participants, not masters. Speaking too much suggests misunderstanding this balance. So silence becomes a form of accuracy. Not everything needs naming, not everything benefits from description. Maps that tried to label these regions struggled. Names shifted. Spellings changed. Descriptions contradicted one another. What could not be fixed could not be governed easily. Administrators preferred certainty. Silence refused it. Even when absorbed into larger systems, these quiet practices persisted beneath official structures. Laws existed, but enforcement was subtle. Customs were followed without reminder. Order maintained itself quietly. This confused those who equated order with visibility. Silence hid maintenance. In moments of crisis, this became clear. While loud systems reacted dramatically, issuing commands and demands, quiet systems adjusted incrementally. They redistributed effort. They conserved resources. They waited. Waiting is often mistaken for inaction. It is not. Waiting allows options to remain open. Silence preserves flexibility. Loud declarations lock choices into place. Once spoken, words demand consistency. Silence allows revision without embarrassment. This made silence adaptable. Over long spans of time, adaptability mattered more than strength. Strong systems broke when stressed beyond design. Quiet systems bent. They absorbed pressure without announcing strain. No alarms. No collapse. Just subtle shifts. Archaeology struggles with this. There are fewer ruins. Fewer inscriptions. Less evidence of crisis. Continuity leaves fewer marks than disruption. Historians notice gaps. Silence lives in those gaps. It exists between events, between records, between assumptions. It explains why some changes never happened, why some expansions stalled without clear cause. Silence does not resist force directly. It outlasts it. Force requires momentum. Silence requires patience. Patience is cheaper. So silence continues, not as an ideology, not as a tactic consciously chosen every day, but as an inherited comfort with restraint. A confidence that nothing must be proven immediately. That presence does not require announcement. That survival does not require spectacle. Silence remains where it began. Not dominating. Not withdrawing. Just quietly shaping the paths others choose not to take. Silence does not end with people. It extends into routines, into memory, into the way time is felt rather than counted. Time in quiet places is not segmented aggressively. Hours are not owned. Days are not conquered. The passing of time is noticed through change in light, temperature, movement. Clocks exist, but they are consulted, not obeyed. This alters urgency. Urgency thrives on noise. Deadlines shout. Silence softens them. Tasks are completed when conditions allow, not when pressure demands. This does not mean slowness. It means alignment. Work begins when the environment agrees. This frustrates systems built on constant output. Productivity models assume uniform conditions. Silence rejects uniformity. It treats variation as the baseline, not the exception. Weather decides pace. Health decides pace. Observation decides pace. And so efficiency looks different. Less wasted motion. Less correction. Fewer errors born from haste. Silence encourages foresight without prediction. Instead of planning far ahead in detail, people prepare broadly. Tools are versatile. Knowledge is transferable. Skills overlap. When something breaks, replacement is already possible without panic. Panic is loud. Silence has no use for it. This attitude changes how risk is understood. Risk is not something to be challenged for status. It is something to be respected for its indifference. Bravery is quiet endurance, not display. Those raised within loud cultures misinterpret this as fear. They mistake caution for weakness. They assume that what is not confronted is avoided. But avoidance is not the same as submission. Silence chooses where not to be. This choice preserves energy. Energy conserved becomes resilience. Resilience does not announce itself until it is needed. And when it is needed, it does not ask permission. Conflict, when unavoidable, appears suddenly and ends quickly. There is no ritual buildup. No escalation theater. Action occurs only when outcome is already likely. Victory is not celebrated loudly. Survival is assumed. Excess emotion would invite imbalance. Noise after danger feels inappropriate. This makes silence difficult to provoke. Insults fall flat. Threats lose meaning when they are not echoed back. Fear depends on recognition. Silence refuses to recognize it. Even dominance requires acknowledgement. Silence denies acknowledgement. Over time, this creates a strange asymmetry. Loud systems burn energy trying to be noticed. Quiet systems remain unchallenged by simply not responding. Power shifts without confrontation. This is why silence is so often misunderstood in historical records. Chroniclers describe absence where there was choice. They record withdrawal where there was strategy. They interpret restraint as incapacity. But silence was never about inability. It was about sufficiency. Enough food. Enough knowledge. Enough stability. No need to expand. No need to announce presence. Expansion introduces dependency. Dependency introduces vulnerability. Silence avoids both by remaining internally complete. This completeness is invisible from the outside. Outsiders measure success by growth, by reach, by footprint. Silence leaves a small footprint deliberately. Small footprints are harder to track. And so silence survives conquest not by resisting it, but by remaining irrelevant to its goals. You cannot conquer what does not organize itself around what you want. Land that does not promise surplus does not attract administrators. People who do not demand recognition do not become symbols. Systems that do not broadcast grievances do not trigger response. Silence becomes camouflage. Not hiding, but blending. It matches the background of the world itself: wind, snow, forest, night. These things are not empty. They are full of information, but only to those listening. Listening replaces speaking. Listening reveals patterns speech would interrupt. Silence trains attention outward instead of inward. Ego softens. Identity becomes functional rather than performative. Who you are matters less than whether you are useful. This makes reputation local, not portable. Fame cannot travel through silence. Status dissolves beyond familiarity. This frustrates empires, which depend on symbols traveling intact across distance. Silence dissolves symbols. What remains are actions remembered only by those directly affected. No monuments. No inscriptions. No permanent record demanding interpretation. Memory lives where it is needed and fades where it is not. This is not loss. It is efficiency. Nothing is stored unnecessarily. And so silence continues doing what it has always done. Not resisting history. Not shaping it loudly. But letting it pass around, over, and eventually beyond. When noise fades, as it always does, silence is still there. Unmoved. Unclaimed. Still listening. Silence adapts to people as much as people adapt to it. It notices who walks softly, who pays attention to detail, who moves without demanding the world notice. Those people thrive quietly, in alignment with the rhythms of survival that cannot be shouted into existence. Loudness attracts attention, and attention requires energy. Silence avoids both. In this environment, mistakes are tolerated if they are silent. Loud mistakes draw scrutiny. Quiet errors can be corrected before consequences become visible. Observation becomes the primary tool, not instruction. Children raised in this world learn patience intuitively. They are taught less by words and more by example. If a footstep breaks a branch and draws notice, it is remembered. If a voice interrupts wind or snow and changes nothing, it is forgotten. Silence teaches timing, spacing, restraint. Over decades, this accumulates into culture. Norms emerge not from law but from practice. People act in ways that reduce conflict without anyone issuing orders. Cooperation is implicit. Behavior is shaped by consequence rather than decree. That travel through silent regions reveals patterns outsiders cannot see. Paths are subtle, marked by small signs, gestures, sounds that blend with natural background. Outsiders miss them. They get lost. Frustration builds. Panic arises. They leave, convinced the land itself conspires that it does not. It merely does not reward intrusion. Even in warfare, silence remains a weapon. It denies information. It denies reaction. Ambushes are effective not because they are loud, but because the enemy cannot interpret absence. They assume safety where there is none. They move recklessly because gaps in sound or sight feel like gaps in vigilance. Quiet preparation often exceeds visible force. An army that marches silently, for days, without trace, arrives more potent than one that announces itself. Fatigue, uncertainty, and misinterpretation become the true opponents. Silence operates on perception. It manipulates expectations. It shapes belief without speech. Victory or survival is measured not by combat alone, but by the absence of error and the preservation of resources. And when silence is finally broken, by necessity, by weather, by outsiders, it does not collapse. It absorbs. It reorganizes. It incorporates disturbance without claiming it as part of its narrative. Noise passes through, leaving the underlying order intact. Generations inherit this pattern. It becomes instinctive. Movement is calculated. Words are measured. Observation dominates interaction. Even festivals, rituals, and ceremonies are tempered by restraint, ensuring that no act creates excess that cannot be absorbed quietly. Outsiders notice inconsistency first. They expect the world to operate by their rules. They interpret restraint as stagnation, absence as submission, patience as cowardice. They miss the subtle mechanisms that preserve communities across centuries. Silence is indifferent to misinterpretation. It does not require understanding. It only requires endurance. And endurance is timeless. That it survives famine, flood, invasion, conquest, and collapse. Loud systems rise and fall around it, leaving traces of destruction. Silence persists quietly, unrecorded, uncelebrated, unacknowledged. The longer one observes it, the more apparent it becomes that silence is not a passive state. It is active restraint, deliberate patience, careful attention, and subtle influence. It operates through absence, shaping outcomes invisibly, bending events around itself rather than forcing them. No one shouts at it. No one writes songs about it. Yet it survives where empires have fallen, and its lessons echo long after voices have gone. Silence endures. It adapts. It waits. And in waiting, it outlasts almost everything else. It does not dominate. It does not demand. It simply remains. And those who learn to move with it, not against it, find themselves capable of surviving what others would not. Silence teaches patience on a scale that spans lifetimes. It is not a single moment of quiet, but a continuum, hours, days, years folding into one another with barely a ripple. Those who live within it learn to notice subtle changes, a shift in wind, the sound of ice cracking, the way snow collects differently in the morning sun. These small details carry meaning far beyond words. Attention becomes a skill, not a choice. People begin to understand the world by what it does without announcing itself. Rivers freeze silently, storms gather without warning, animals move through forests without sound. Patterns emerge in absence, not in presence. Observation is the language of survival. This fosters a form of intelligence that outsiders rarely recognize. Loud cultures prize speech, debate, and display. Silent cultures prize understanding, adaptation, and endurance. Strategy becomes anticipation rather than reaction. Conflict in such a society is subtle. Battles are avoided if possible, not because people are weak, but because unnecessary confrontation risks revealing vulnerabilities. Victory is measured not by kills or spoils, but by the preservation of resources, health, and cohesion. Even diplomacy follows this principle. Negotiations occur in quiet gestures, long pauses, and careful observation rather than grand speeches. Agreements are implicit. Compliance is expected without verbal insistence. Misunderstandings are rare because people watch carefully, listen carefully, and speak sparingly. Outsiders misinterpret this as passivity, indecision, or fear. They underestimate the quiet, assuming that absence of noise equals absence of power. They fail to account for endurance, patience, and adaptability, the hidden mechanisms that ensure survival in environments others abandon. Children raised in this culture internalize its lessons naturally. They learn by seeing, hearing, and feeling, not through instruction or punishment. Mistakes are corrected quietly. Curiosity is nurtured through observation. Movement is deliberate, speech economical. Over generations, this becomes instinctive. Patterns of behavior pass down not as law, but as habit. Communities regulate themselves. Order is maintained without constant authority. Knowledge is stored in memory, in skill, in the careful reading of the environment, rather than in texts or proclamations. When outsiders arrive, they perceive chaos because it does not resemble their own systems. They see forests that are organized differently, rivers that are treated with respect rather than reshaped, people who move without announcement. They fail to notice the subtle organization, the rules encoded in restraint, observation, and timing. Silence preserves not only survival, but culture. It shields knowledge from destruction, hides practices from exploitation, and allows communities to thrive despite forces that might overwhelm louder, more visible societies. Noise passes. Silence remains. It waits through storms, through invasions, through famine. It absorbs shocks. It spreads slowly, invisibly, influencing generations without recognition, and in this enduring quiet, wisdom accumulates, not as proclamations, but as lived experience. It does not seek admiration. It does not demand recognition. It simply persists. Those who fail to understand it assume the world is empty. Those who learn from it survive when the world collapses around them. Silence is not absence. It is presence. Measured, patient, and eternal. It outlasts conflict, disease, and the fleeting clamor of empires. And in its enduring quiet, it shapes history more than almost anything else, without ever saying a word. Silence does not need monuments. It does not require record-keeping or praise. Its influence is subtle, cumulative, and invisible to those who expect evidence in loud gestures. Civilization mistakes absence of spectacle for absence of action. History mistakes quiet resilience for insignificance. Yet silence is never inactive. Its operations are measured and deliberate. Decisions unfold over long spans. Mistakes are corrected incrementally. Energy is conserved and directed efficiently. Actions are invisible until their effects are undeniable. In this environment, survival depends on anticipation more than reaction. Observation outweighs confrontation. Adaptation replaces imposition. Those who move loudly consume resources, attract attention, and exhaust themselves. Those who move quietly endure. Even in matters of life and death, silence dominates. Diseases are noticed not through panic but through pattern. Scarcity is managed through measured allocation. Conflict is approached strategically, with restraint. Leaders command without shouting, followers obey without coercion. Coordination occurs through gestures, observation, and unspoken understanding. Learning becomes a quiet process. Knowledge is accumulated by doing rather than declaring. Skills are honed in private. Mistakes are absorbed, corrected, and rarely repeated. Those raised in this system internalize subtlety as instinct. Time itself is perceived differently. Moments are not counted in hours or minutes but in change, the slope of snow on a hill, the depth of frost in morning soil, the movement of clouds across the sun. Life is attuned to natural rhythms rather than imposed schedules. This fosters patience, resilience, and foresight. Decisions are slow, deliberate, and intentional. Haste is recognized as risk. Noise is recognized as distraction. Even power operates quietly. Dominance is maintained not through spectacle but through consistency, discretion, and endurance. Influence spreads subtly, through action, example, and the careful shaping of environment and circumstance. Outsiders misinterpret silence as weakness, absence, or inaction. They fail to see the underlying structures that preserve stability, efficiency, and survival. Their loud efforts expend energy while quiet systems absorb and adapt. The true advantage of silence is its invisibility. Its strength is ignored until it is too late. Communities structured around restraint survive where more aggressive systems fail. They move with the world rather than against it, bending without breaking, yielding without surrender. Silence does not demand obedience. It does not require recognition. It simply shapes what is possible. And when storms, invasions, famine, or disease sweep through, it endures, unbroken, unseen, yet profoundly effective. Silence is not passive. It is strategic. It is enduring. It is eternal. It outlasts all noise, all spectacle, all clamor of fleeting empires. Those who learn from it survive when others collapse. Those who ignore it repeat the mistakes of history. And in the end, silence persists. Quiet. Steady. Patient. Unyielding. It waits. It observes. It endures. And everything else passes. Silence moves through generations like a river hidden beneath ice. It carries knowledge without claiming it. It shapes behavior without dictating it. Communities learn to trust observation over proclamation, restraint over impulsivity, patience over spectacle. Every decision, every movement, every action is filtered through awareness of consequences that are not immediately visible. Mistakes are not punished loudly, they are corrected quietly. Those who fail are guided subtly, their errors absorbed into the collective memory. No drama, no spectacle, no shame. Learning is woven into existence rather than announced in words. Even warfare follows this principle. Victory is measured not by noise or spectacle, but by efficiency, survival, and long-term stability. Battles are avoided when possible, not because of fear, but because unnecessary conflict consumes resources, reveals vulnerabilities, and risks unintended consequences. Preparation is silent, deliberate, and thorough. Supply lines are maintained without fanfare. Scouts move without leaving trace. Strategy relies on observation, timing, and anticipation rather than bluster and bravado. Those who underestimate silence find themselves exhausted, misled, and defeated by forces they cannot perceive. Daily life reflects the same philosophy. Tools are maintained meticulously. Work is deliberate, rhythmic, and measured. Energy is conserved. Habits are designed to minimize waste and maximize resilience. Tasks are completed efficiently because attention is paid to small details that outsiders often ignore. Even social order is maintained subtly. Leadership is quiet, influence exercised through example rather than decree. Compliance is earned, not demanded. Norms emerge organically, enforced by observation, understanding, and shared experience rather than law or punishment. Time itself is perceived differently. Hours are measured not by clocks but by change, light, temperature, movement. Life is attuned to natural rhythms rather than imposed schedules. Decisions are made with foresight, not reaction. Actions are deliberate, energy conserved, outcomes anticipated. In silence, knowledge accumulates. Skills develop. Communities endure. Patterns emerge that outsiders cannot see. Strategies unfold that are invisible until their effects are undeniable. Noise may pass, spectacle may fade, and empires may crumble, but silence persists. It absorbs shocks. It survives storms. It outlasts disease, famine, and invasion. It endures because it does not claim attention, demand resources, or provoke recognition. Silence does not act through force. It acts through patience. It does not demand obedience. It earns it subtly. It does not boast of survival. It simply survives. And those who align with its rhythm endure when others fail. Silence is not absence. It is presence. Measured. Patient. Resilient. Everlasting. It waits. It watches. It outlasts. It persists when everything else is gone. And in its quiet endurance lies a power louder than any battle cry, more enduring than any empire, and more effective than any display of strength. Those who understand this need no words. Those who fail to understand are forgotten. Silence shapes history not through conquest, but through survival. It endures. It persists. It waits. Silence does not rush. It allows the world to reveal itself on its own schedule. Mountains crumble slowly. Rivers shift imperceptibly. Seasons turn, snow melts, wind moves leaves, and life continues, all without announcement. Those attuned to silence notice these changes, adjust, and endure. Those who are not are swept aside. In silence, observation is sharper than action. The smallest movement, the faintest sound, the subtle shift of shadow becomes information. Awareness is not a skill to be taught but a condition to be lived. It is learned in stillness, practiced in patience, and perfected through endurance. Energy is preserved because it is not wasted on noise, impulsive displays, or futile struggle. Effort is applied only when it produces results. Decisions are calculated, timing precise, outcomes anticipated. Reaction becomes unnecessary because preparation is complete. Communities shaped by silence survive disasters that overwhelm louder societies. Famine is met with ration distribution. Disease is mitigated through careful hygiene and observation. Conflict is avoided when possible, and when unavoidable, it is approached with strategy rather than bravado. Even traditions are influenced. Rituals, ceremonies, and cultural practices are not extravagant, they are functional. They reinforce order, convey knowledge, and build cohesion without excess. Celebration exists but is tempered, not wasted on show. Energy is never squandered. Silence also teaches humility. It shows that the world does not conform to ego, desire, or expectation. It shapes people who can endure uncertainty, who can wait without complaint, and who can act decisively when necessity demands. Bravery in this context is quiet and controlled, not loud and performative. Those who fail to understand silence interpret it as weakness or absence. They expect confrontation, spectacle, or obvious proof of power. They overlook the structures of endurance, the subtle mechanisms of survival, the careful orchestration of observation, preparation, and restraint. Yet silence works regardless. It shapes outcomes invisibly. It absorbs shock. It preserves knowledge, skills, and communities across generations. It is resilient because it is unassuming. It does not provoke attention, nor does it depend on recognition. Time in silence is cumulative. Small, deliberate actions compound into survival, stability, and knowledge. Mistakes are corrected quietly, unnoticed by outsiders. Patterns emerge without announcement. Wisdom grows without display. Even power is quiet. Influence is exercised through example, patience, and consistency rather than proclamation. Dominance is maintained without spectacle. Change occurs subtly, imperceptibly, until its effects are undeniable. Those aligned with silence endure storms, famines, invasions, and disease. Those who oppose it burn energy and fail. Those who oppose it burn energy and fail. Noise is temporary, silence is permanent. It does not demand attention. It does not crave recognition. It does not boast. It persists. It observes. It endures. And when the world rages around it, silence remains steady, calm, and unbroken. It is the foundation upon which survival is built. It is the quiet force that outlasts empires, armies, and catastrophes. It is the enduring rhythm of life itself. Silence is not empty. It is complete. It is not passive. It is potent. It is not weak. It is eternal. It waits. It watches. It endures. And everything else passes. Silence is a teacher, but it never speaks. It shows the consequences of every action, not through explanation, but through observation. A misstep, a wasted resource, a moment of haste, each leaves a mark. Those who notice adapt. Those who do not are corrected by circumstances rather than instruction. Lessons unfold in real time, often invisible to the inattentive, unavoidable to the observant. The rhythm of survival is measured in subtle cues, the way snow compacts underfoot, how wind shifts in narrow valleys, how animals move and react. These details are not trivial. They are the language of the world, written in movement, sound, and absence. Understanding this language allows people to act effectively, anticipate danger, and preserve themselves. In a silent society, decision-making is slow but deliberate. Each choice is weighed against consequences that may not be immediately visible. Action without observation is wasteful, energy misapplied cannot be recovered. Those who learn to wait, to watch, and to move quietly are rewarded with endurance, resilience, and foresight. Conflict is approached with caution. Battles are chosen only when unavoidable, and even then, strategy replaces raw aggression. Noise is a liability, exposing positions, intentions, and vulnerabilities. Those who can act without drawing attention achieve more than those who rely on spectacle or intimidation. Life itself is measured in patterns rather than events. Seasons, weather, growth, and decay provide constant feedback. Mistakes are corrected over time, absorbed by the collective experience, rarely requiring harsh intervention. Children learn not through verbal instruction, but by observation, imitation, and the subtle guidance of elders who act rather than preach. Even community structure reflects silence. Order is maintained without proclamations. Norms emerge from collective behavior rather than edict. Leadership is exercised through example and consistency, not command. Compliance is earned naturally, rather than enforced. The strength of silence lies in its invisibility. Outsiders mistake it for weakness, absence, or indecision. They fail to recognize that quiet endurance, patient observation, and deliberate action can outlast noise, spectacle, and force. Those who act without understanding the subtle rhythms expend energy in vain, while silent systems absorb, adapt, and endure. Resources are preserved, risks minimized, and survival optimized. Knowledge is passed down not as formal instruction but through practice, observation, and repetition. Each generation adds to the cumulative wisdom, expanding the capacity for resilience. Even in the face of chaos, storms, invasions, disease, silence persists. Noise may rage, empires may fall, and loud voices may dominate temporarily. Yet the systems built on patience, observation, and subtle action endure beyond spectacle, beyond immediate perception, beyond recognition. Silence does not claim victory. It does not seek admiration. It simply persists. It endures when others collapse. It survives when others fail. It watches when others act blindly. And those who align with it, who learn its patterns, who move with its rhythm, inherit endurance that is invisible, timeless, and unstoppable. Silence does not rush. It does not complain. It waits. It observes. It survives. Everything else fades. Only silence remains. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is a framework for life itself. It organizes experience, structures behavior, and governs decisions without a word. In silence, every movement has meaning, every pause has consequence. The world communicates constantly, but only those attuned can understand. Wind, water, snow, and shadow all convey information that words cannot capture. To ignore them is to invite error, to notice them is to survive. Communities built around silence operate on observation and subtle guidance. Children are taught through modeling rather than instruction, elders influence through example rather than decree. Mistakes are absorbed by the group, corrected gradually, and rarely repeated. Knowledge is preserved not in books but in habits, patterns, and intuition. Energy is the most valuable currency. Noise, spectacle, and impulsive action expend it wastefully. Silence conserves it, directing effort only where it yields results. This allows societies to endure hardships that others cannot: famine, disease, extreme weather, or invasion. Survival is not heroic, it is methodical, deliberate, and measured. Conflict is approached differently under silence. Battles are avoided when possible, not out of fear, but out of calculation. When unavoidable, engagements are precise, coordinated, and quiet. Surprise is maintained, exposure minimized, losses controlled. Victory is measured not by glory but by continued survival, stability, and the preservation of resources. Even leadership functions differently. Power is exercised through consistency, foresight, and example. Influence spreads subtly. Compliance is voluntary, earned through trust rather than demanded through decree. Hierarchy exists not for domination, but to maintain order and balance. Time itself is understood through the lens of change rather than measurement. The slow thaw of ice, the migration of animals, the shift of wind, these become markers of passage and opportunity. Decisions are made in relation to patterns rather than deadlines, outcomes anticipated rather than reacted to. Silence cultivates humility. It shows the limits of control and the necessity of observation. Bravery is not performative but measured, endurance, not loud action, is valued. Knowledge of the world comes from listening, watching, and adapting, not from shouting commands or asserting dominance. Outsiders mistake silence for weakness, absence, or indecision. They fail to recognize the underlying structures that preserve stability and enable long-term survival. They expend energy on spectacle while silent systems adapt, absorb, and endure. Even in the face of devastation, silence persists. It is resilient because it is unobtrusive. It outlasts empires, armies, and disasters because it depends not on display but on endurance, not on recognition but on persistence. Those who live by its principles endure. Those who ignore it are consumed by circumstance. Noise is temporary, silence is permanent. That IT watches. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence remains. It is invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes the world not through spectacle, not through force, but through patient, deliberate, enduring presence. And those who understand it inherit a power older and stronger than empires, wars, or the clamor of fleeting voices. Silence does not demand acknowledgement. It does not need applause. That IT simply is. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. And in its quiet permanence lies a mastery that words cannot capture, that noise cannot disturb, and that time itself cannot erase. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. Silence is a teacher of limits. It demonstrates the boundaries of action, the consequences of misjudgment, and the power of restraint. Those who rush, shout, or strike without thought expend themselves against forces they cannot see. Those who move quietly, measure each step, and observe first endure. Time, environment, and circumstance become allies rather than obstacles. In silence, preparation is everything. Tools are maintained meticulously. Supplies are rationed carefully. Routes are planned with attention to terrain, weather, and unseen hazards. Every decision is weighed against unseen consequences, every movement considered for efficiency and safety. Mistakes are absorbed gradually, lessons integrated quietly, and resilience grows imperceptibly. Societies shaped by silence are invisible engines of survival. Disease, famine, or attack does not dismantle them quickly. They adapt. They reorganize. They endure because they never waste effort on spectacle, distraction, or needless confrontation. The weak points are hidden, the strengths reinforced, and the community moves as a coordinated organism. Even knowledge is preserved silently. Skills are passed through demonstration, observation, and repetition, not through proclamations or ceremony. Wisdom accumulates not in words but in habits, actions, and careful attention to patterns. The past informs the present subtly, shaping decisions without fanfare. Conflict under silence is deliberate. Battles are chosen, not provoked. Engagements are precise, coordinated, and calculated. Surprise is maintained. Losses are minimized. Outcomes are measured not by glory but by continued stability and survival. Victory is enduring, not loud. Leadership is exercised through example, consistency, and foresight. Authority is earned through reliability and judgment, not imposed through fear or spectacle. Compliance arises naturally from trust and observation, not from coercion or announcement. Time itself is understood as movement, not measured in hours or days. Patterns of seasons, weather, animal behavior, and natural phenomena become markers of passage and opportunity. Decisions are based on observation and anticipation, not reaction and impulse. Silence cultivates endurance, patience, and humility. Bravery is measured, not performative. Knowledge is gained through observation, experience, and subtle understanding. Adaptation replaces aggression. Long-term survival replaces immediate satisfaction. Outsiders mistake silence for weakness or absence. They expend energy in spectacle, conflict, and noise, unaware that quiet systems absorb, adapt, and endure. The power of silence is invisible, cumulative, and unstoppable. Even in devastation, silence persists. It survives storms, famine, invasion, and disease. It does not seek recognition, applause, or reward. It endures because it depends not on force but on patience, not on display but on careful action, not on ego but on understanding. Those who align with it endure when others collapse. Those who ignore it are consumed by circumstance. Noise is fleeting, silence is eternal. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence remains. It is invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival through restraint, observation, and quiet persistence. Those who understand it inherit power beyond empires, wars, and the noise of fleeting voices. Silence does not demand acknowledgement. It does not need applause. It simply is. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. And in its quiet permanence lies mastery that cannot be destroyed, disturbed, or erased. The world may roar. The world may crumble, but silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes the fate of generations. It outlives the proud, the loud, and the hasty. It survives when everything else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal. Silence moves through the world like a river unseen beneath ice. It flows steadily, carrying consequences, lessons, and patterns without announcing itself. Every shadow, every ripple of wind, every shift in the earth communicates something to those who are attentive. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is random. Time in silence is cumulative. Small, deliberate actions compound into lasting structures, habits, and endurance. Mistakes leave traces, and those who notice adjust. Those who do not are corrected by circumstance rather than instruction. Adaptation becomes second nature, resilience automatic. Even the environment participates. Rivers carve valleys quietly over centuries. Forests grow, die, and regrow, shaping paths and obstacles. Snow blankets the land, hiding weaknesses, revealing patterns only to those who watch carefully. The world teaches in silence, and those who listen learn faster than those who speak. Conflict is governed by observation. Battles are chosen carefully, never sought without cause. Engagements are precise, coordinated, and measured. Surprise is maintained. Expenditures of energy are calculated. Losses are minimized. Victory is enduring because it preserves strength rather than consuming it. Leadership in silence is influence without announcement. Authority is earned through reliability, foresight, and consistency. Guidance is given through action, example, and subtle correction rather than decree. Compliance is natural because it is understood, not demanded. The rhythm of life is attuned to natural cycles. Seasons, weather, and animal behavior mark the passage of time. Decisions are made in relation to patterns rather than deadlines. Actions are deliberate, timed for maximum effect, and adapted to changing circumstances. Patience becomes power. Observation becomes strength. Endurance becomes mastery. Silence teaches humility. It reveals the limits of control, the unpredictability of the world, and the necessity of careful attention. Bravery is quiet, measured, and purposeful. Knowledge is gained through observation, experience, and adaptation rather than boasting or demonstration. Those who fail to recognize silence mistake it for weakness, absence, or indecision. They expend energy on spectacle and noise, unaware that quiet systems absorb, adapt, and endure. The world responds not to those who shout, but to those who act with understanding. Even in devastation, silence persists. It survives famine, disease, storms, and invasion. It does not seek recognition, applause, or reward. Its endurance comes from patience, precision, and understanding. Those aligned with it endure when others collapse. Noise is fleeting, silence is eternal. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence remains. It is invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival through careful observation, deliberate action, and enduring patience. It outlasts empires, wars, and the roar of fleeting voices that it does not demand acknowledgement. It does not need applause. It simply is. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. And in its quiet permanence lies a mastery that cannot be destroyed, disturbed, or erased. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, and survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal, the world moves in cycles, quiet yet relentless. Night falls without announcement. Darkness stretches across land and water, shifting shadows and altering paths. Those who rely on noise, spectacle, or assumption stumble. Those who move quietly, observing each shift, each subtle signal, navigate successfully. Silence teaches through absence, revealing what is important by what it does not say. Every element carries information. The wind whispers through trees, shifting branches and leaves in patterns that can warn, conceal, or guide. Snow falls differently on soft earth than on compacted ground, leaving subtle clues to what lies beneath. Water flows, subtly reshaping paths and boundaries. Mountains and hills obscure and reveal, providing advantage or hazard depending on attentiveness. The unobservant act blindly, exhausting energy on misjudged choices. The attentive conserve, adapt, and endure. Small, deliberate movements accumulate into mastery over circumstance. Every step is measured, every decision considered in relation to environment, timing, and consequence. Conflict under silence is methodical. Engagement is chosen with care, never reckless. Encounters are managed precisely, without fanfare. Energy is preserved, and loss is minimized. Victory is defined by endurance and stability, not spectacle or immediate gain. Noise is a liability, subtlety is strength. Leadership is exercised through demonstration, consistency, and foresight. Influence spreads not by words but by example. Compliance emerges naturally, not through coercion. Order is maintained without proclamations, hierarchy existing to coordinate rather than dominate. Time is marked by patterns rather than events. Seasons shift, rivers rise and fall, animals migrate, snow and ice form and melt. Awareness of these rhythms informs decisions, guiding movement, resource use, and survival strategies. Patience becomes power, observation becomes strength, endurance becomes mastery, silence cultivates humility. It reveals the limits of control, the unpredictability of circumstance, and the importance of careful attention. Bravery is deliberate and measured. Knowledge grows not through proclamation, but through observation, experience, and subtle correction. Those who fail to recognize silence expend energy on spectacle, misjudgment, and noise. They act prematurely, waste resources, and invite failure. Those attuned endure, adapting to circumstance and observing lessons without verbal instruction. Even in devastation, silence persists. It survives famine, disease, storms, and invasion. It seeks no reward, no recognition, only continuation. Its power lies in endurance, precision, and understanding. Those aligned with it endure when others collapse. Noise fades, silence endures. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence remains. It is invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival, guiding decisions and conserving energy. It outlasts empires, conflicts, and the roar of fleeting voices. It does not demand acknowledgement that it does not need applause. It simply is. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. And in its quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, beyond chaos, beyond time itself. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, and survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal, the world breathes quietly, in rhythms imperceptible to most. The wind moves through valleys and forests, whispering directions, warnings, and patterns to those who listen. Every ripple of water, every shift of snow, every shadow falling across the land conveys knowledge. The patient observer understands what the impatient cannot. The world speaks in absence as much as presence. Movement is deliberate. Every step is measured. Every action calculated in response to forces both visible and unseen. Energy is precious, spent only when necessary. Mistakes are absorbed slowly by the environment, teaching lessons without words. Conflict is subtle, not explosive. Engagements are chosen, not provoked. Battles are managed quietly, with precision and restraint. Surprise is maintained, losses are minimized. Victory is enduring, defined not by immediate gain, but by long-term survival and preservation of strength. Noise is avoided, subtlety is power. Leadership exists quietly. Authority is earned through consistency, foresight, and example. Influence spreads without proclamation, compliance arising naturally from trust and observation. Order is maintained without spectacle, hierarchy serves coordination rather than domination. Time is measured in cycles. Seasons shift, rivers rise and fall, snow accumulates and melts, animals move according to patterns older than memory. Awareness of these rhythms informs every decision, guiding movement, conserving resources, and ensuring endurance. Patience is mastery, observation is strength, quiet understanding is survival. Silence teaches humility. It reveals limits of control, unpredictability of circumstance, and the necessity of careful attention. Bravery is measured and purposeful. Knowledge grows through observation, adaptation, and subtle correction. Those who ignore silence expend energy on noise, misjudgment, and distraction. They act prematurely, waste effort, and invite failure. Those attuned endure, their actions guided by observation and quiet understanding. Even in devastation, silence persists. It survives famine, disease, storms, and invasion. It seeks no reward or recognition. Its power lies in endurance, precision, and awareness. Those aligned with it endure when others collapse. Noise fades, silence remains. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence endures. Invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal, silence shapes survival through careful observation, deliberate action, and enduring patience. It outlasts empires, conflicts, and the roar of fleeting voices. It does not demand acknowledgement. It does not need applause. It simply exists. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. In its quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, beyond chaos, beyond time. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal, the earth moves without announcing itself. Mountains stand silently, indifferent to effort or ambition. Valleys deepen gradually, shaped by rivers that flow relentlessly, carrying lessons of patience and persistence. Forests grow, decay, and regrow in cycles too slow for most to notice. Each branch, each leaf, each root is a record of quiet adaptation, a testament to endurance and balance. Every movement is deliberate. Footsteps are measured. Energy is precious and spent only when necessary. Mistakes are absorbed, corrected not by voices or commands, but by the slow, consistent feedback of the environment. Adaptation is earned through attention and patience, survival the unspoken reward. Observation is power. Subtle shifts reveal paths, dangers, and opportunities. Patterns appear in tracks, in water flow, in changes of light. Those who notice navigate with grace, those who ignore falter and fail. Awareness becomes instinct, instinct becomes mastery. Conflict is subtle, chosen with care. Engagements are measured, deliberate. Surprise is maintained. Loss is minimized. Victory is defined not by spectacle, but by endurance and preservation of strength. Noise is a liability, patience, a weapon. Subtlety is power, leadership functions in silence. Authority is earned through consistency, foresight, and example. Influence spreads without announcement, compliance arises naturally through trust and observation. Order is maintained quietly, hierarchy exists to coordinate, not dominate. Time is cyclical, not linear. Seasons shift. Rivers rise and fall. Snow accumulates and melts. Animals move according to patterns older than memory. Awareness of these rhythms guides decisions, conserving energy, resources, and strength. Patience becomes power. Observation becomes mastery. Endurance becomes survival. Silence teaches humility. It reveals the limits of control, the unpredictability of circumstance, and the necessity of careful attention. Bravery is deliberate, measured. Knowledge grows through observation, adaptation, and subtle correction, not proclamation. Those who ignore silence expend energy on noise, spectacle, and misjudgment. They act prematurely, waste effort, and invite failure. Those aligned with silence endure, guided by careful observation and quiet understanding. Even in devastation, silence persists. It survives famine, disease, storms, and invasion. It seeks no reward or recognition. Its power lies in endurance, precision, and awareness. Those aligned with it endure when others collapse. Noise fades. Silence persists. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence endures, invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival through careful observation, deliberate action, and enduring patience. It outlasts empires, conflicts, and the roar of fleeting voices. It does not demand acknowledgement. It does not need applause. It simply exists. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. In its quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, beyond chaos, beyond time. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits that it watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal. The wind moves without effort, bending trees and carrying whispers through the forest. Rivers trace ancient paths, wearing down stones silently, steadily, over centuries. Water pools in hidden hollows, reflecting sky and shadow without announcing itself. Each ripple carries lessons in patience and persistence. The land shifts imperceptibly, erosion, growth, and decay are continuous, unnoticed by most, but essential to understanding. Every action is measured. Footsteps fall lightly on snow, moss, and soil, leaving traces that speak only to those who notice. Energy is precious, conserved for moments that demand it. Mistakes are absorbed and corrected by circumstance rather than words. Observation and adaptation become essential tools, survival is learned, not instructed. Awareness shapes experience. Shadows reveal paths. Patterns appear in wind-blown leaves, frozen tracks, or the flow of a river. Those attuned understand the rhythms of the world, those inattentive stumble blindly. Observation becomes instinct. Instinct becomes mastery. Conflict is deliberate and restrained. Engagement is chosen, not provoked. Loss is minimized, victory is measured not by spectacle, but endurance. Noise is danger, silence is strength. Subtlety is power. Leadership manifests quietly. Authority is earned through consistent example and foresight. Influence spreads without proclamation. Compliance arises naturally through trust and observation. Order is maintained without display, hierarchy exists to coordinate rather than dominate, time is cyclical. Seasons shift. Rivers rise and fall. Snow blankets and retreats. Animals follow patterns as old as the land. Awareness of these cycles informs every choice, conserving energy and sustaining life. Patience becomes power. Observation becomes mastery. Endurance becomes survival. Silence teaches humility. It reveals the limits of control, the unpredictability of circumstance, and the necessity of careful attention. Bravery is measured and deliberate. Knowledge grows through observation, experience, and subtle correction rather than verbal instruction. Those who ignore silence expend energy on spectacle, noise, and misjudgment. They act prematurely, waste effort, and invite failure. Those aligned with silence endure, guided by careful observation and quiet understanding. Even in devastation, silence persists. Famine, disease, storms, and conflict cannot break it. It seeks no reward, no acknowledgement. Its power lies in endurance, precision, and awareness. Those attuned endure when others collapse. Noise fades. Silence remains. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence endures. Invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival, guiding decisions through careful observation, deliberate action, and enduring patience. It outlasts empires, conflicts, and the roar of fleeting voices that it does not demand recognition. It does not require applause. It simply exists. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. In its quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, beyond chaos, beyond time. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal, snow drifts across the landscape, settling softly over uneven ground. Every mound, every hollow, every frozen branch is a record of time's quiet passage. The land shifts imperceptibly, shaping pathways, hiding dangers, offering guidance to those who notice. Footsteps move carefully, calculated, conserving energy. Each movement leaves traces that the attentive can read, tracks leading to safety or warning, subtle disturbances signaling presence or absence. Mistakes are absorbed by the earth itself, corrected in silence. Patience is survival, observation is power. The forest exhales slowly. Leaves stir without sound, bending under invisible currents of air. Light filters through the canopy in fragmented patterns, shifting with the sun's slow passage. Every shadow, every ripple of wind, every subtle movement carries information. The world communicates constantly, quietly, to those willing to listen. Rivers carve their courses steadily, wearing down rock and soil with persistent determination. Their waters whisper lessons of resilience and adaptation. Pools form in hidden hollows, reflecting the sky and surroundings. Even in motion, they are constant, a measure of time and endurance. Conflict is measured, deliberate, restrained. Engagements are chosen carefully, not provoked. Victory is defined not by spectacle, but by endurance, preservation, and the efficient use of energy. Noise is liability, silence is strength. Subtlety is power. Leadership manifests quietly. Authority is demonstrated through example, consistency, and foresight. Influence spreads naturally, without announcement. Compliance is achieved through trust and observation rather than coercion. Order is maintained subtly, hierarchy serving coordination, not dominance. Time is cyclical. Seasons change, rivers swell and recede, snow accumulates and melts. Animals migrate, forage, and nest according to patterns older than memory. Awareness of these cycles informs every action, conserving energy and sustaining life. Patience becomes power. Observation becomes mastery. Endurance becomes survival. Silence teaches humility. It reveals limits, unpredictability, and the necessity of careful attention. Bravery is deliberate. Knowledge grows through careful observation, experience, and subtle correction, rather than loud instruction or demonstration. Those who ignore silence expend energy on noise, spectacle, and misjudgment. They act prematurely, waste effort, and invite failure. Those attuned endure, guided by careful observation and quiet understanding. Even amidst devastation, silence persists. Famine, disease, storms, and conflict cannot break it. It seeks no reward, no recognition. Its power lies in endurance, precision, and awareness. Those aligned with it endure when others collapse. Noise fades. Silence persists. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence endures. Invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival through careful observation, deliberate action, and enduring patience. It outlasts empires, wars, and the roar of fleeting voices that it does not demand acknowledgement. It does not require applause. It simply exists. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. In its quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, beyond chaos, beyond time. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal. Mist curls along the frozen ground, weaving between trees, settling over rocks, disappearing into hollows. Each movement is deliberate, imperceptible, carrying subtle information. Frost glints faintly on branches, reflecting light in fractured, silent patterns. Every surface tells a story if observed closely, every disturbance speaks without words. Movement is careful. Every step weighs consequences. Energy is preserved, expended only when necessary. Mistakes are absorbed by the land itself, corrected slowly. Observation and adaptation guide action. Survival is learned through experience rather than instruction. Rivers hum quietly beneath ice, flowing with relentless patience. Pools form in shaded hollows, reflecting sky and shadow. Patterns emerge in the water's movement, currents, eddies, hidden depths. Those attuned navigate with precision, those who ignore risk faltering blindly. Awareness is instinct, instinct is mastery. Conflict is subtle, deliberate. Engagement is chosen with care. Loss is minimized. Victory is defined by endurance, preservation, and efficiency rather than spectacle. Noise is a liability, patience and subtlety are weapons. Strength lies in quiet precision. Leadership manifests without proclamation. Authority is demonstrated through consistency, foresight, and example. Influence spreads naturally, earned through trust and observation. Order is maintained silently. Hierarchy exists to coordinate, not dominate. Time is cyclical. Seasons shift, snow accumulates and melts, rivers rise and fall. Animals move according to patterns older than memory. Awareness of these cycles guides action, conserving energy and sustaining life. Patience becomes power. Observation becomes mastery. Endurance becomes survival. Silence teaches humility. It reveals the limits of control, the unpredictability of circumstance, and the necessity of careful attention. Bravery is deliberate and measured. Knowledge grows through observation, experience, and subtle correction rather than words. Those who ignore silence expend energy on noise, spectacle, and misjudgment. They act prematurely, waste effort, and invite failure. Those aligned with silence endure, guided by careful observation and quiet understanding. Even amid devastation, silence persists. Famine, disease, storms, and conflict cannot break it. It seeks no reward, no recognition. Its power lies in endurance, precision, and awareness. Those attuned endure when others collapse. Noise fades. Silence persists. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence endures. Invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival through careful observation, deliberate action, and enduring patience. It outlasts empires, wars, and the roar of fleeting voices. It does not demand acknowledgement. It does not require applause. It simply exists. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. In its quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, beyond chaos, beyond time. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal. The snow thickens, settling in layers that muffle sound. Every movement is deliberate, every step calculated. Footfalls leave traces, temporary marks in a vast, indifferent landscape. Frost clings to branches, glistening faintly as light shifts. Shadows stretch and contract slowly, revealing patterns unnoticed by hurried eyes. Wind threads through the forest, carrying whispers of distant movement. Leaves stir gently, rocks hum with the weight of ice, and rivers flow beneath fragile sheets of frozen surface. Each sound, each vibration, conveys information to those who pay attention. Noise is not necessary, observation is sufficient. Energy is conserved. Motion is intentional. Mistakes are absorbed by the land and corrected through careful adjustment. Awareness becomes instinct. Instinct becomes mastery. Conflict is chosen, not imposed. Engagements are deliberate, measured. Loss is minimized. Victory is defined not by spectacle, but endurance, patience, and preservation. Silence is a weapon. Subtlety is strength. Leadership manifests quietly. Authority is demonstrated through consistent action and foresight. Influence spreads naturally, earned through trust and observation. Order exists without proclamation. Hierarchy coordinates, it does not dominate. Time moves in cycles. Snow accumulates and melts. Rivers swell and recede. Animals move according to patterns that predate memory. Those who observe these cycles act with efficiency, conserving energy, preserving life. Patience becomes power. Observation becomes mastery. Endurance becomes survival. Silence teaches humility. It reveals the limits of control, the unpredictability of circumstance, the necessity of careful attention. Bravery is measured and deliberate. Knowledge grows through observation, experience, and subtle correction, not proclamation. Those who ignore silence expend energy on noise, spectacle, and misjudgment. They act prematurely, waste effort, invite failure. Those aligned with silence endure, guided by careful observation and quiet understanding. Even amid devastation, silence persists. Famine, disease, storms, and conflict cannot break it. It seeks no reward, no recognition. Its power lies in endurance, precision, and awareness. Those aligned with it endure when others collapse. Noise fades. Silence persists. It observes. It waits. It adapts that it survives. Everything else passes. Only silence endures. Invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival through careful observation, deliberate action, and enduring patience. It outlasts empires, wars, and the roar of fleeting voices. It does not demand acknowledgement. It does not require applause. It simply exists. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. In its quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, beyond chaos, beyond time. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal. Branches creak under the weight of snow, bending slowly, almost imperceptibly, toward the earth. Each sound is faint, measured, carrying information for those paying attention. Frost glitters on needles and bark, refracting light into fragmented patterns that shift with the day. The land speaks softly, continuously, to those who notice. Footsteps move carefully, deliberate, minimizing energy use. Each step leaves a trace, temporary, fragile, yet meaningful to those who read the terrain. Mist curls along the frozen ground, slipping into hollows and valleys, revealing paths, concealing hazards. Observation becomes instinct, instinct becomes mastery. Water flows beneath thin ice in hidden streams, tracing ancient paths. Pools collect in hollows, reflecting the sky and surrounding trees. Currents swirl and eddies form, carrying lessons of patience and persistence. Those attuned move in harmony with these rhythms, unaware, yet guided. Movement is precise. Mistakes are absorbed by the land, corrected silently. Conflict is deliberate, engagement chosen only when necessary. Victory is endurance, preservation, and efficiency, not spectacle. Noise is danger, subtlety is strength, leadership manifests without announcement. Authority is demonstrated through consistent action and foresight. Influence spreads naturally, earned through observation and trust. Order exists quietly. Hierarchy serves coordination, not domination. Time moves slowly, cyclically. Snow accumulates and melts. Rivers rise and fall. Animals migrate and forage according to patterns older than memory. Those who observe these cycles act with efficiency, conserving energy, preserving life. Patience becomes power. Observation becomes mastery. Endurance becomes survival. Silence teaches. It reveals limits of control, unpredictability, and necessity of careful attention. Bravery is measured, deliberate. Knowledge grows through observation, experience, and subtle correction, not words or proclamation. Those who ignore silence waste energy on noise, spectacle, misjudgment. They act prematurely, invite failure. Those aligned with silence endure, guided by quiet awareness. Even in devastation, silence persists. Storms, famine, disease, conflict cannot break it. It seeks no reward, recognition. Its power is endurance, precision, awareness. Those attuned endure when others collapse. Noise fades. Silence persists. It observes. It waits. It adapts. It survives. Everything else passes. Only silence endures. Invisible yet potent. Passive yet strategic. Quiet yet eternal. Silence shapes survival through careful observation, deliberate action, enduring patience. It outlasts empires, wars, the roar of fleeting voices. It does not demand acknowledgement. It does not require applause that it simply exists. It endures. It observes. It outlasts. In quiet permanence lies mastery beyond destruction, chaos, and time. The world may roar. The world may crumble. But silence persists. It waits. It watches. It endures. It shapes generations, outlives the loud, survives when all else fails. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It is eternal,